All right. Hey there. How's it going? On the discussion this time, we're talking about racing at altitude. Yes, Boulder 70.3 people are no longer Boulder full because they're not doing it currently. Maybe they'll change that. But for you 70.3 Boulder people and for anybody doing any other races at altitude, I like to address this situation because people start kind of getting all worked up about doing races at higher elevations when in reality 95% of us out there doing races, it's not going to be as much of a factor as that we think. And there's things that we could do to mitigate it, aside from having to go live there for a few months to get acclimated. So we'll just kind of discuss some points about it, and maybe we'll dig down a little bit deeper in future calls about what we can do to address this situation. So racing altitude, number one, don't freak out. Don't get all worked up about it. If you're going to do Boulder 70.3, sign up for it, put it on your calendar, and just get ready for it. My virtual group members, you can get the off-season plan. You'll get a very specific plan. We'll kind of address a little bit of the situation. Again, with calls and with everything like that, we can discuss what other options are out there in order to get you better prepared for race day and potentially offsetting any kind of altitude effects you're going to feel. But we'll discuss a little bit more kind of a higher level for the first time around. So the higher altitude can, under any kind of normal, just take whatever you're doing, whether it just be functioning daily or you're actually doing workouts or anything, increase your heart rate, increase your cardio output, increase your blood pressure, and decrease your ventilation. So your oxygenation of everything, your body operations, muscles, lungs, heart, whatever function, organs, whatever you got to do to function out the day can actually decrease your ventilation because you got less oxygen. It decreases as you go up. So you've got less to work with to oxygenate your blood. So it's not, a lot of people think, oh, I'm going to get up there at elevation and I'm just not going to be able to breathe. Well, that's not the case. It's not a situation where you can noticeably detect that you're at elevation and it's like harder to breathe or breathing through a straw. A lot of people will say that when they do the swim, it's like breathing through a straw. And I kind of balk at that a little bit. Probably the reason why you're breathing heavily in the swim is either your wetsuit's a little bit tight on you, you're a little bit anxious about the whole situation. You go out there and you start breathing heavy anyway, and you go out too hard, and then you're really feeling the effects. Because if you go out too hard, your heart rate's already elevated just because you're up at elevation and you're all worked up about the swim start anyway, and your anxieties about race starting in general, aside from altitude. That stuff's kicked in. You go out there and you start swimming as hard as you can, and you're all worked up. Yeah, it's going to be like breathing through a straw, but it's not just because of altitude and elevation. A lot of other factors that go in there. So with that, keep in mind, like I said, for ventilation, there's less oxygen into your system. So as you go up in elevation, there's less readily available oxygen. Doesn't mean you're depleted. I mean, professional athletes live out there, so it's not a detriment to you. Short term, it could be if you're working at high intensities. If you're going to go out there and do a threshold run, you're not going to feel as great as when you do at whatever elevation you came from. But if you go out there and like just a zone 2 run, yeah, it's going to be, you're going to see a little bit of a difference where that zone 2, you reach your heart rate a little bit quicker than you would like to, and your pace may be a little bit slower. But overall, it's not going to be a drastic difference. You're not going to go out there and run 10-minute miles where you're running 8-minute miles. But there's, like I said, there's things you can do to kind of offset that and be ready for it, because it does depend on your effort. So if you're going out there doing high intensity stuff, threshold intervals, and you're doing killer bike intervals, you're going out there for like a training camp or something, you're going to notice a difference. So the harder you work, the more oxygen you need to take to get your system going, your muscles firing. You're going to feel that when you're out there doing the greater effort activities. But if you're going out there just a long bike ride, you're going to feel a little bit, but it's not going to be as noticeable. You can counter this, and I've addressed this with other races that are in the heat, and what you can do in the training leading up to that is we'll unpack that a little bit more, but you can counter the effects of altitude similar to the way you counter effects for training for heat. So if you go out there and it's going to be 95 degrees like at Chattanooga in 2019, 95 degrees out there and 75% humidity, there's things you can do in your training leading up to the race that involve just more than going out and training in hot weather, that you can get your system acclimated to producing more red blood cells and more volume in your blood in general to keep you more readily available. So you're sweating, and all of your oxygenation, all the blood and everything that needs to go to your muscles and organs to keep functioning and doing your racing. You could have more of that available, because that's very similar to what professional athletes do. They go out to Boulder and they train out there because over time they adapt and their bodies adapt to whatever they need to be doing to create more blood flow, to be able to run harder and faster. And when they come down in elevation, it's less effort, less energy that they need to expand to reach those goals. But if you also notice, professional athletes are coming to Kansas to train for Kona, because the conditions in Kona, it's hot and humid, produce the same results if you're training in it over time. So they come out to Kansas for 2 or 3 weeks. They go out there and they do a bunch of work, and then they get their bodies adapted to working efficiently in adverse conditions. So that actually also helps them get ready for doing things in altitude as well. So we'll kind of address that in later calls and later training. That there's things you could do outside of the regular swim, bike, and run and strength training that you could do before, after, during, to get yourself acclimated. So when you go out to Boulder, it's not as much of an impact than would be if you just went out and did your training regardless of weather conditions, and then went out there and tried to race and do the best you could. But also something to consider is people go out there and well, I want to get out there a week ahead and I want to acclimate to the conditions. Well, 1 week is not going to be enough to acclimate. You need to be there for weeks to get acclimated to altitude, to get your body used to it, and do several different kinds of intensity workouts to get your body used to supporting what you wanted to do at the paces you want to do. And all this stuff needs to be adjusted over time. And a week, 4 days, 5 days isn't going to do it. Going out there for a week at a time, months down the road, may help a little bit, but it's really, unless you've had the time and the resources to go out there and do that, hey, more power to you. I'd love to go out in Boulder and just go out and work out all the time like a professional triathlete, but unfortunately I've got obligations to you guys and responsibilities at home that I can't just zip out there whenever I want to. But if you want to get that training done, you can do it at home, and it's fairly simple and straightforward. There's things you can do. So you don't need to go out there weeks ahead of time. You don't need to freak out about the altitude. It's not a huge factor for 90% of the athletes out there doing it. If you're out there, if you're the top, you're pointing into the arrow of the top of the age group, it is going to make an impact, and you do want to do special consideration. And if you're really out there to win the race or something, probably need to do a little bit more of acclimation, going out 2-3 weeks beforehand and just going out there and working out and getting used to it. But for us age groupers like myself, going out there even 3 days earlier is not going to get you acclimated. I advise going out there a little bit early just so you get settled and ready and everything, and it helps reduce anxiety and nerves. But in the end, it's not going to do much for getting you acclimated. The best thing you could do is make sure you're hydrated when you get up there, because personally, coming from the Midwest in a hot and humid area, when you go up to elevation, it's not as humid. It's the heat and humidity or it's the heat, not the humidity that'll get you. But it's a dry heat, whatever, all those stupid things. When you get out there, you don't notice it as much because you're losing more moisture through your breathing and everything. You're not sweating on your clothes. It's not noticeable that you got sweat on there, but it is evaporating off of you. And especially if you're out in direct sunlight, it really gets you out there at altitude. You definitely feel the impact of the sun. So if you step in the shade, it feels like 20 degrees difference. But keep that in mind. So when you go out there, you're gonna lose sweat. Sweat's gonna evaporate off you. You're not really gonna notice it. So hydration is a little bit more important than going out there and getting acclimated to altitude. So, like I said, this heat training is going to be key. Making sure we do certain things in our training leading up to the race that adapts you over time. So when you get out there, you don't need 4 or 5 weeks of acclimation and altitude. You could get there 2 days before the race and still be fine. Keep hydrated. Do minor little things. Just get used to being up there, and then do the best race plan that you can on race day. There's nothing you don't need to necessarily throttle it back. If it's hot out there, if the air temperature is going to get in the hundreds like it did one year for the full, that's a different story. But if it's the typical August weather, highs get up in the 80s, humidity is like 10% and something ridiculous. So the most you have to focus on is your race pacing, your race strategy, your nutrition, your hydration, pretty much like every race, kind of a broken record when it goes to that. But like I said, you can address this altitude issue in your training regardless of where you're at. and what conditions that you train with. If you're up north and the highs in the summers is only in the 60s and you're worried about getting acclimated to the heat out there, it's not that big of a deal. We can do things to get past that. So just pay attention. That will come later in a few other calls and discussions and courses and clinics that I'll do, and we'll address that. But if you got any particular questions about kind of the high level, looking at altitude from a 10,000-foot view, no pun intended, drop me a note, drop me an email, send me a message, do whatever you need to, and I'll always get back to you. But that's it for now. Hope you got some information out here, and we'll talk to you next time.